60% to pass. Obviously, 100% means you have to do a lot more. But I think the 60% is important because it helps us to know the borderline that we must get past. You're moved on automatically after your time allocated section. You can't go back, so you get a sense of urgency, which I suppose is quite realistic. Time management requirement, I suppose, is that we need to be able to read the material, identify the tasks, plan the answer, and then produce the answer and check it. I certainly like the checking process as soon as you finish the plan, because I think that it gives you a chance to address any errors that you've made in that early point. But here we've got a series of slides now just looking at time management. You do need enough quantity, so it is highly important really that you recognise this, that there's a lot said about quality, but the markers can only mark what they can see, and you do need to have a certain amount of quantity. And we found, well, to be perfectly honest, it wasn't me, but some of the people I know who work at Reed did some work, and they found that the candidates that they had about 40 in the cohort, and they looked at them with one of the previous case study exams under the old T4, and the candidates that weren't writing very much were identified, and they were able to identify that they'd written less than 2,700 words. And then they were able to see the candidates who'd written more, and not necessarily of wonderful quality, but they had written more in terms of quantity. And it was quite staggering that on this rather small sample, that all of the ones who'd written less than 2,700 all failed. And the ones who had written more, I think they all passed, from my memory, but certainly nearly all of them passed, if it wasn't quite all of them. So it is, you do need to write a lot, and that means that you've got to be writing quite fast to get it in. I'm typically looking at about 80% of the time on the section for writing and 20% of it for planning. And I do see the thinking process as being different. So in the planning time, I think it's very demanding on the brain, because I think that you're really thinking about the question. You're thinking about how on earth you're going to structure your answer and so on. And once that's done, you're then doing a much more mechanical approach. So the idea would be to work a lot faster. So a good bit of planning, setting up that we've got 45 minutes. So much is going to be done by such and such a time. If you can see where my mouse is, I've got it in the top right-hand corner. You get the countdown clock as you attempt your question, so you know when your time is up. So this end column is really valuable, and certainly a lot of students I've been talking to recently, we use these figures perhaps to a far greater extent than we do the individual timing of each activity. So it just helps to know what you must have done by a particular time. I think it's useful. I'll point something out before I move on to the next slide. This bottom one's called recommendation. 5.5 minutes allocated to that, and that's going to earn us leadership marks. So you do need to make sure that you're answering all the questions. Some of you who've been doing the mock exams through Astranti will have seen this vital aspect that CIMA don't simply give you 100 marks and you have to get 60% of them and pass. You've actually got to get at least 33% in your technical, your business and your people criteria. So the only way to be absolutely sure of that is to make sure that you answer every single question. So here, a little bit about calculating times. Reasonably straightforward. Here we start on the time-saving tips. Try and be concise. Keep the paragraphs short. You know, but when I'm talking about short, I'm talking about the typically 3 sentences. And I suppose I could add to that, to make it easier for your marker, don't have long sentences. So if it looks as if you've got a subclause or something, try and make a separate sentence rather than a subclause within a single sentence. The more complex you make the sentences, the more difficult it is for them to extract what you're writing if they're speed reading. Here, never look at the pre-scene. In fact, in the whole of the exam, I can't imagine that there would be a need for you to look back at the pre-scene. I think CIMA often talk about these exams as being similar to interviews for jobs, and you may well spend several weeks preparing for an interview for a job, looking at information about the company, looking at information about the industry that the business is working in, and then thinking about other things that they might ask you. And on the day of the interview, you turn up and they may ask you a few questions and give you a bit more information. But you wouldn't, well, I hope anyway, you wouldn't dive into your bag and pull up information that you've done on your research. And similarly in the exam, it's not a good use of your time to look at the pre-scene. You need to know it. You don't need to know nitty-gritty details, but you do need to know broad brush facts. I think one of the broad brush facts that we picked up on in Masterclass 1 was that we have a trade receivables period of about 51 days. Fine. If you can remember, it's not quite 60, then that's probably good enough. And they operate on terms with their customers that effectively average out at about 30 days. So there's something a bit amiss as far as trade receivables are concerned. But that doesn't need you to go and look at it. You don't need to look at the pre-scene in order to do that. Then you just bring it back and you take it forward. And once you've completed the plan, this is where you really do save time. Your plan is everything, and you don't need even the unseen that you were given on the day. This is how you really get fast. You work at a high pace, just typing fast. And yeah, if you've got a fast typing speed, you have a distinct advantage.